I'm Dr. Greg Popchak here with episode 24 of the Beatitudes podcast. And we're continuing our look at the 8th Beatitude, Blessed are the dads who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. But this week we're looking at righteousness and marriage. You know, how do we properly order our relationship with our spouse? You know, this Beatitude is all about the pushback that we get for making choices to put our marriage and family life first. And I want to speak first to the importance of praying with your wife every day to have a righteous marriage, to have a godly marriage. And I know I've talked about this before. Excuse me, and I flog this pretty regularly in the podcast, but I just can't say it enough. I really genuinely believe with all my heart that you can have a marriage with two Christians in it, but you can't really have a Christian marriage unless your marriage is rooted in prayer. And I don't just mean, that you're saying prayers together, but I mean that you're bringing your marriage to God every day. I may have shared this before, but, Lisa and I, when the alarm goes off in the morning, the first thing we do is roll toward each other and just pray for our marriage and family. Lord, just help me be the husband that you want me to be. Help me to love my wife the way she deserves to be loved, and to show her how much I care about her and cherish her and treasure her. And help me to find ways to make her day a little easier or more pleasant, and show us really how to have the marriage and family life that you want us to have. And then she'll offer a similar prayer for us as well, so that she would be the wife that God wants her to be. And that really helps us keep focused, in a very busy life where we each of us has about 1 million things that we do every day, just like you guys do. But it does help us remind each other of the importance of our marriage and of prioritizing that relationship and prioritizing the need to work for each other's good, even when we're busy and overwhelmed and even a little frustrated. So I can't underscore enough the need to ask God every day to bless your relationship and teach you how to love each other and how to have a truly righteous relationship. But this Beatitude is really not so much about that as it really is about persecution, right? Blessed are the dads who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. And so what I really want to focus on here relates to those times when your wife is actually pushing back against you having a faithful marriage or living your faith. I talk to a lot of men who get married and then perhaps have a conversion experience or a reversion experience, and they're very passionate about wanting to bring their spouse and their children to God, and they're playing catch up to some degree because the marriage didn't start that way. Or the family didn't start that way. And now they're midstream, and all of a sudden their spouse and their kids are pushing back, against dad who's become a religious nut, so to speak. And how do you deal with that? That's a particularly heartbreaking place to be. And so I just wanted to put this message out there for all the dads who are in that place where you are feeling persecuted by your wife for your attempts to live a more faithful life. And I want to offer some suggestions for how to deal with that gracefully. The first thing has to do with reframing the problem. We tend to frame that issue as a religious issue, as a problem related to religious differences. And the advice that we get then is, well, you just have to be patient because you can't force your religion down somebody else's throat. And of course, that's true as far as it goes. But the real problem in that situation, when religious issues become a dividing matter in marriage, it usually has more to do with respect than it does with religion. Because when you respect somebody, you work hard to try to find the truth and the goodness and the beauty and all the things that they find true, good, and beautiful, right? So where you have a marriage with a couple who don't share a faith, but they do share mutual respect, what you find is the less faithful or less spiritual spouse really does their best to try to see what's good in all the things that are faithful, all the things that their mate wants to do. So for instance, their wife might not be comfortable leading prayer, but she would at least be willing to, be quiet and respectful while her husband leads prayer and participate in it. She's at least there, and she bows her head and she's respectful of the space. She might not add a lot to it. She might not necessarily believe it, but she has enough respect for her husband that she's willing to support it. She might go to Mass with her husband, even though she's not so sure about all that Catholic stuff. It's important to him, so she's going to go with him. So the where there's respect in the relationship, the religious differences don't tend to divide as much. Where it becomes a real problem is where there is a failure of respect in the marriage overall. And here's a simple test. I ask people who call into the radio program with this issue a simple question. So let's take it off of religion for a minute and imagine that you and your wife have a difference of opinion about anything else other than religion. How does it usually end? Does it end with the two of you being able to identify what's good about each other's positions and creating a new solution that meets both of your needs? Or is it one where, you have a difference of opinion and you either have to give in, or just agree to disagree? And if it's the latter, that you resolve those differences by either giving in or agreeing to disagree, that's more likely a failure of respect in the relationship. Because again, what it's really showing here is that not just in religion, but in every other issue, you're not able to have what's good about your position or your ideas acknowledged. And so that's going to carry over to religion. And why religion becomes a problem in those marriages is because that's the one place where the faithful spouse is unwilling to give in, or they're unwilling to agree to disagree. It's just too important. And so their spouse, who's used to either winning all the interactions or, agreeing to stay out of each other's way, all of a sudden, gets hit with this demand that, no, you need to reckon with this. And they don't know how to do that. So where religion becomes a really divisive issue in relationship, it's mostly to do with a failure of basic respect throughout the relationship altogether. And so I want you to see, if that's what you're dealing with, I need you to see that as the issue instead of seeing this as a religion problem. It's more of a respect issue. And it's important to reframe that with your spouse, to say to your wife, look, I understand that you're not in the same place as I am spiritually. And I'm not interested in forcing my religion on you. Yes, of course, I would love for you to be in this with me. But I get it. You have your own journey. I'm fine with that. But what I'm not okay with is the fact that this is really highlighting the fact that you really struggle to respect me. And when I say respect, I don't mean do whatever I tell you to do. I mean, try to find the truth and the goodness and the beauty in the things that I find true, good, or beautiful. And it's not just about religion. Most of the things that we disagree on, I either have to give in or we agree to disagree. And this is one area where that's not going to work. And so I think that God is inviting us to learn to respect each other more. And I'm happy to learn what that means for me to you. But this is what it means to me, that you would be willing to work with me on this issue, especially around my faith, right? And then if you need to seek professional help, then you seek professional help, because when there's a failure of respect in the basic marriage, that's not an issue that's easy for you to work out on your own. For the simple reason that if your spouse is the one who doesn't respect you and, you need to get their permission basically to have a need acknowledged, then you coming to them and saying, I need you to respect me, they won't acknowledge it. So you need a third party to be able to step in and say, yeah, that really is an issue. And here's how you can begin to heal that. So if you find yourself in that situation, it's going to be important to seek some professional help. And if we can help you with, faithful means to address that, then don't hesitate to reach out to us at CatholicCounselors.com. But that's really the first step. If you're experiencing religious persecution from your wife, then that is most often not a religion problem, but a failure of respect. And it's important to really see that problem for what it is and get the appropriate level of help for that. But let's say, whether that's the issue or not, the second thing that you need to keep in mind is love better. When we come into the faith, or we get, we have that reversion or conversion experience. Again, from the radio program, from our clients, we hear a lot that the more faithful spouse, especially if it's the man, because we love ideas, right? We kind of get caught up in all the learning and the information, the faith information. We want to pass those faith facts on to everybody. And it becomes the only thing we ever talk about. And that drives everybody around us crazy. So it's something to be aware of. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just that in small bits. But we're afraid that if we don't, preach at our wife or our kids constantly, then they won't come to appreciate our faith, and they won't ever pray with us or share their faith with us. We feel like it's our job to get them to heaven, which it is. And the best way to do that, though, is to preach at them. And that's really not the case. The most important thing we can do is learn to love better. The best way to evangelize somebody who has not had that experience of Christ is to let them see how much more we are capable of loving them because of God's grace than we were before we had that grace. So I really encourage you, if you're in that position, to make a list of all the things that your wife has ever asked you to do, whether that was, to be willing to talk about this or to do it, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. I mean, assuming that these are not things that are, morally impermissible or demeaning in some way, but to make a list of all the things your wife has ever asked of you and start doing them. Just start doing them without telling her, without asking, without anything. Just do them at least for several weeks, right? And without a price tag attached. You're just going to do that because that's what God is asking you to do. We consecrate our homes, we consecrate our families by living out Christ's sacrificial love and doing those things that you know that your wife has asked you to do, but you've just not done because it makes you uncomfortable or because, it's just not you. That's sacrificial love. And that's what's ultimately going to consecrate your marriage and your family life to God, your ability to live out that sacrificial love. And that's how you live out your baptismal priesthood, the common priest of the laity, and consecrating your marriage and family life to God by making the sacrifice that a priest does that consecrates these common things and makes them holy. The more you live out that sacrificial love, you're not just trying to be a witness and inspiring your wife to do the same. You're actually bringing Christ's love into your marriage in a way that you haven't before. And at some point, your wife's going to say, "Why are you being so nice to me?" Or some version of that. And then that's the opportunity you have to say, honey, I pray a lot about how the man that God wants me to be. I pray a lot about, how God wants me to love you and our kids. And I've just been really convicted over time that there have been a lot of things that I've said no to you about for no good reason other than that I just didn't feel like doing it or because I didn't think it was me. And the more I pray about all that, the more I realize that God needs me to be a man who can say yes to you. And I want to be that man. And that's going to melt her heart. I mean, and this is not a gimmick, by the way. I mean, you can't do it unless it's real, right? Because it'll come across as fake. But if you're dedicating yourself to doing those things that you know that your wife has asked you to do, but you've just resisted doing it not because it's morally improper or because it's personally demeaning, but just because it's just, not you and you've not been comfortable with it. The more you're doing that, the more she's going to really see God's love pouring out through you. And that's going to attract her to your faith. That's going to say something. So even if your wife is hostile to your faith, doing these kinds of things is really the best way to evangelize her, not preaching, not sharing faith facts. That's fine to a degree, but the main thing is really sharing that witness of love. And then again, I'm going to end as I began, by talking about prayer again. It's about being patient and praying, but not, yes, of course, that God would heal your marriage. Whoops, excuse me, knocking everything over. Yes, of course, that God would heal your marriage, that God would give you a more faithful relationship, that God would touch your wife's heart. But most importantly, the prayer you want to be making is, God, show me what to do. Teach me how to respond to my wife. Teach me what to say and when to say it and how to say it. Teach me what to do, most importantly, that would really open up her heart to you. And be patient with that. Now, patience isn't just waiting. Patience isn't a passive virtue. It's the active virtue of stepping back and analyzing the progress so you know what to do next. You've probably never heard of patience that way, but that's really what patience is. Patience, it wouldn't be a virtue if it was just about standing back and waiting for something to happen. Right? Patience is that active virtue. Like if you're working on a project, right? It doesn't matter whether it's you're putting something together or you're trying to learn to do something different. Sometimes what we just need to do when it's not going well is to step back, look at the progress we've made, look at what still needs to be done, and be conscious about choosing the next thing. That's what patience is. Patience is that virtue that allows us to be mindful and intentional about what we're doing, so that we're not just, doing more of the same thing to get the same results, the same unsuccessful results over and over again. So as you are praying, you're also being patient by reflecting on what's working. What is actually touching your wife's heart? What isn't? Is the fact that you've had that conversation about the catechism 300 times, is that not working? Maybe I should try something different. Or maybe that particular conversation I did seem to make a difference, so maybe I want to follow up on that. Or maybe, the fact that I did the dishes without being asked and, brought home flowers and, asked her what she wanted to do this weekend instead of just telling her what I wanted to do. Maybe those little things are the things that are making the difference. But the point is, patience is making you step back, reflect on the impact that you're having, see what still needs to be done, and then planning your next steps. And so in the course of all of that, you're also praying, God, teach me how to respond to my wife. And these steps, it can take quite a while, but these steps that I've outlined, praying with your spouse if they're amenable to it, if not, identifying that as a respect issue and seeking the help that you need to deal with that respect, loving better and loving differently, and being patient and praying that God would teach you how to respond to the challenges you're facing to living your faith in your marriage and family life, are the kinds of things that will bear fruit in time. Now, I'd love to continue the conversation, so please post whatever questions you've got in the Home Builders Forum in the Catholic Home app. We'd love to continue the conversations. There are so many good, faithful dads who are part of the community, and we'd love to be able to have this discussion together and support you in living out your fatherhood. But thank you so much for tuning in today, and more next time on pursuing righteousness in your relationship with your kids. Stick around.